Hey, thank you for all coming in. So, we all know why we're here, correct? Okay. Before I continue, I ask that you listen the whole way through. My opinions may change throughout the course of this presentation, and I don't want anybody watching this to come to the conclusion of what I think before completing the full thing. With that being said, let us begin. A while ago, I made a video that kind of blew up this channel to where it is now, discussing the state of indie or mascot horror, and in that video, I brought up Garten of BanBan, and how I genuinely believed that the game originally was made as a satire take on how a lot of indie games are perceived, and that the amount of hate that the game was getting wasn't entirely justified. Just to clarify, I am in no way saying that most criticism said about the game is invalid. It's entirely true. The game is bland, it's boring, it's sloppily put together, and it has no backbone or interesting story, at least to me, and like everybody on planet Earth. For the past few years of my life, I've always tried to see things more positively, because I think that ultimately taking the more pessimistic side of things tends to make you a pessimistic person, and I try not to be that. So I tried my hardest to see the best out of BanBan, and before Garten of BanBan II released, I came to the conclusion that BanBan 1 was a goofy little game made by two dudes that wasn't meant to be taken seriously. And I think the idea that Garten of BanBan is the worst of indie/mascot horror, and it represents how the genre is today, was a little bit of an insane take, because this is just one game, and is possibly satire and not meant to be taken seriously. But with the release of Garten of BanBan II, my perception has changed a little bit. I think the shitty charm of the first game still holds up, maybe minus the merchandise they sell, which doesn't instantly oppose or prove false that the game is satire, which is in a way scummy, I can see that. Maybe it was made with the intent of being marketable. I still think, despite all that, it can be considered a corny satire game, if the message is still this is what indie horror is now. And hell, maybe even making it marketable was a part of the satire message. But that then blurs the line between the game being a satire and the game being a shitty marketable indie horror title. So, is Garten of BanBan serious? Or is it satire? It's hard to say, but let me play devil's advocate. Let's look at the facts presented in the first game. Garten of BanBan is a clearly bad game. The game is not good. The game is bad. It's sloppily put together, the story is confusing at best and boring at worst, and doesn't give a whole lot to the game. Visually, it doesn't look horrible, but keep in mind most of these games use a lot of pre-made assets. One might see this as an attempt at marketing off of indie/mascot horror, considering they have merchandise, which could be used to lure impressionable kids into buying and giving the game devs money so they can profit off of something that doesn't deserve a single buck. Now, I saw Garten of BanBan as something of a joke. I couldn't look at this game and instantly turn down the path that this game is bad and made to market off indie horror. How dare two people make a free game that sells merch that you don't have to buy? All I saw was a silly little joke project that sold merch on the side to maybe get some money out of it to possibly put into the next installment. I mean, hell, what the fuck is a Garten? I didn't think this was a big deal at all, but some people did. And a lot of people went out of their way to harass and make very questionable remarks about the creators. Saying what you want about these screenshots, whether you believe they're joking or not, it's still uncalled for to say this about two guys who made a free video game. I mean, guys, the game was free! And then BanBan 2 came along, and that one wasn't free. What happened? Suddenly, it seemed like the brothers had a sudden change in direction with the game. BanBan 2 is now being sold for $5, which isn't much, but the game is definitely not worth those $5. I do think that Garten of BanBan 2 was a better game in quality and quantity. The game had a lot more to it as compared to the original game, but it still lacked a lot of aspects. Most of what was in the game felt randomly put in with little to no explanation. A lot of things just generally weren't explained, and it felt rushed and unfinished. But it was nowhere near as bad as the first game. It was definitely an improvement, adding features like voice acting, more characters, and cosmetics. But despite these improvements, it didn't add anything to the overall gameplay, which was just as boring and lame as the first one. I could go deeper into the flaws of this game, but that isn't the point. Like I said, it felt as if the Euphoric Brothers had a sudden change in direction, and it felt as if they were taking the game more seriously. Considering the costs and the fact that they were already working on the third installment of the franchise, it didn't seem like the game had the same satire feel as the original. I guess we'll have to see when BanBan 3 comes out, but until then, BanBan has done an amazing job at blurring the line between a satire take on indie games and a shitty game made to profit off indie horror. Now, with Garten of BanBan kind of out of the way, let's specifically focus on the brothers. Euphoric is hard to spell, so for the sake of my own sanity, I'm mainly going to refer to the Euphoric Brothers as the Brothers. Garten of BanBan was not the brothers' first game ever made. They have made games before this, and like I said in my previous video, these games were much higher quality, both in gameplay and quality. Yeah, I said that in the video. Whoops. What I meant to say is that these games are much higher quality than Garten of BanBan, both in gameplay and visuals. I mean, I can't lie, these games are freaking cool looking. So let's take a moment to discuss Euphoric Brothers' previous games before BanBan. How We Got Here is a game made by Geppo, one of the brothers. You wake up on a floating island high above Earth. On your exploration, you discover ways to find new, unexplored islands and meet strangers who ended up here just like you did. The game opens with you standing on a floating island with a tree and an axe. This island is kind of the tutorial to the game's controls, and it tells you to cut the tree down. You use the tree as a log. You use the log as a bridge to cross to the next island, where you meet everyone's favorite character, Clarence, who's sitting there watching TV. At first, Clarence is introduced as kind of a mean character who only cares about his TV show, but as you progress in the story, he slowly becomes more nice and caring. After talking to Clarence, you enter this cave which has a few buttons on the floor and a statue of one of the brothers, which I believe is Geppo, saying it's scary and light at the same time, which I thought was kind of funny. There was also a jar, I guess. I was kind of confused at first because I couldn't figure out what the statue was for, so I just kind of ran around with it hoping something would happen, and nothing happened. So I went back to the first island to see if I missed anything, and there was a little capybara thing, which was pretty awesome honestly, and I started chasing it. When I got it over to the second island, it knocked over Clarence's TV, where we got to see a little more of his character, and we learned that he was watching a documentary on bioluminescence, and how he'd love to see it for himself one day. I knew what I had to do. I went back to the first island and waited for the bug you may have seen at the beginning of the game to come down, and I put it in the jar. I give it to Clarence, and doing this makes Clarence go into the cave where he sits on one of the pressure plates observing the bug. I have to say, so far these little puzzles have been very fun and interesting, and they feel like somewhat of a challenge, unlike Garten of BanBan's. At least for me, because I suck at puzzles. But using the statue to get the capybara inside the cave, the capybara went and sat on one of the buttons, and I was able to activate all of them. Another bridge activated from outside. I don't want to cover all the game's story, but basically you do a bunch of interesting little puzzles to access new locations, learn more about Clarence and this weird island you're on. Eventually, after doing some more exploration and puzzles and meeting new characters, you can finally leave the islands, but you have a choice. You can selflessly take your own life so that others can leave, or choose to continue exploring the islands. I have to say, the good ending to this game caught me off guard. I didn't really know what to expect, but seeing the character we play as sitting there, lifeless, was pretty sad. It was a sad ending. I have to give props to Geppo for this game. The style is very well done, the writing is much better than expected. I mean, my expectations were not high for this game, but it met them tenfold. The voice acting was pretty good, though not perfect, and some lines could have had retakes, and some of the grammar was incorrect. But it's not too noticeable and doesn't take away from the story. The main problem I had with this game is that sometimes the puzzles felt really confusing, and for like the first 10 minutes I was running around trying to find out what I was supposed to do with this fan, and I still don't know what to do with this fan. I don't know if the fan has a purpose still. That will forever remain a mystery until somebody solves it, which I don't think anybody has. So in all, this is a good game, much better than BanBan, and I'd argue it's one of their best in terms of visuals and gameplay. It's a short, free little game that proves the Euphoric Brothers aren't bad at making games. At least Geppo. Not all of them are great, but they're all unique in their own interesting ways and follow a very similar style, except for Egghead Gumpty. Egghead Gumpty is what seems to be one of the brothers' first 3D horror games, and their first attempt at making something reminiscent of Poppy Playtime. The game is much more well made than Garten of BanBan in its story, gameplay, and visuals, but it's not a great game nor a very good one. There's tons of issues with it, and even though it looks like a cool concept that could have been worked on more, they decided to drop it, most likely because it didn't get very much attention and flopped. So they took a different approach, making a game so bad and so unoriginal that people would have to see it and talk about it, and play it ironically or not. And to be honest, that's kind of brilliant if they genuinely wanted a spotlight in the general indie genre. Instead of a satire and meta-commentary about the indie horror genre, or a seriously made game with the intent of making money, it's a game that's so bad and so intentionally poorly made, and obviously not trying to take itself seriously because it'd be funny, and also because it would make a lot of money. The Euphoric Brothers have always been kind of comedic. I have to admit, I love the humor in their game How We Got Here. A lot of the dialogue was actually very funny and well thought out, so to think that the brothers would make something like this because they thought it'd be funny wouldn't be out of the ordinary for them. I mean, look at this. How is this serious? A game as serious as Poppy Playtime would probably never just put something so out there like this. Aside from Egghead Gumpty or How We Got Here, there's a game I've been wanting to discuss. That game being Introvert, a teenage simulator. Introvert is definitely the Brothers' most controversial game, next to Garten of BanBan, of course, and just warning you, it gets a little bit heavy. This game features, one sec. Introvert is a game about school shootings. Yeah, I told you it gets heavy. The plot centers around a new kid in school who tells you that he's gonna shoot up the school if he doesn't make a few friends in 5 days, but you get to make your own decisions and meet new people and so on. It's a very real game and a very real thing that happens, and it's pretty clear why this is one of their most controversial games. So I decided to play it just to see the true intent behind this game. Considering there were choices in this game, I decided to take the route that would end in what I assumed to be the worst ending, where the school shooting occurs, because I wanted to know how they presented it. The game starts out with you in your room, and as you walk out of the living room, you're met with a dead guy. Just right off the bat, I guess. I don't know. I'm assuming it's supposed to be my dad, but during my whole playthrough, this was never explained. Before I started the actual game, I took the left path, which is where I thought I was supposed to go, but apparently this is just supposed to be a therapeutic skate where Ferris talks to you and comforts you, telling you you're gonna be alright and you just need to let go. Kinda sweet, I guess, and I suppose a game about school shootings should have something like this. Ferris even says if you need to talk, you can talk to him on Twitter, which is nice of him. I don't feel like going over too much of the game, but basically you're a new kid who's mute, and you meet another kid named Chris, who's moved around a lot and never had any friends. If he doesn't have any friends by 5 days, he says he'll shoot up the school. You guys hang out after school, and a few other kids come over to bully you. They start beating up Chris, and you have the option to beat up Chris with them, or not. I chose to beat him up, solely for the purpose of getting to the school shooting part, but it was kinda hard to watch. After you become included into the gang, one of the bullies talks to you about a plan he has to teach Chris a lesson. You go over to his house, and the bully comes in and beats up Chris again. After this, you don't talk to Chris, and he's just seen crying at his desk. The next day, Chris pulls up late to school and pulls out a gun on the class and starts shooting. This was a damn hard thing to watch, as the camera slowly pans away from the class, and as you hear the gunshots fade into the distance, and the game ends. This is a very real representation of how school shootings can come to be. Chris felt like an outcast, like nobody cared for him, everybody hated him, and it led him doing to what he did, and inevitably taking his own life after the shooting. I in no way think that this game was made to glorify school shootings, nor do I think it was made in bad taste, but the execution is questionable. The humor in this game is more centered around Gen Z humor, and for those in the crowd who don't know what that is, here's an example. Not very funny, right? I gotta say, the humor didn't hit as much in this game as it did in How We Got Here, but this game was made by Ferris and not Geppo, so the humor is obviously different. As the screen pans away, you see a huge wolf run by screen, which is in correlation to one of the characters, Emma, who is rumored to be half human and half disgusting monster, like a werewolf. I kinda thought it was funny, but it was also right after one of the hardest scenes to watch in the whole game, so I do think this could have been left out, but whatever. The game is presented as Gen Z humor, so it's gonna be a little edgy. Personally, I would have preferred if this game took itself a little more seriously considered the subject at hand, but it's a fine game overall, though not my favorite from the brothers. It wasn't all that fun. I mean, I summed the game up in like a minute or less, but I played the game for like 40 minutes because most of it was just talking or running around. There is more to the game, although I didn't feel like playing it, but I assume if you defend Chris, it would trigger a better ending, or not. Maybe the outcome is still this, but slightly different. I didn't care enough to play this game again. Aside from how the game played, I liked the style quite a bit, and none of the art was at all bad. The humor was definitely kinda cringy to me, but I don't find a lot of Gen Z shitpost humor funny these days, so the random, extremely loud my ass itches part was very unenjoyable, and I came out of it a little bit more deaf than I already am. There's way more to the game, but I didn't think it was all that important. Pretty much all I wanted to say about this game was that, despite the crude presentation, I don't think it was glorifying school shootings, nor was it made to joke about them, despite the humor. The game ends with these shitposty news articles about what happened, and the credits roll, ending with this message. What I think about this, well, it was made in good faith. I enjoy a school shooting game or movie if the message is to spread awareness about this awful issue, and this game does a hell of a good job at that. The bullying, as shown in this game, are all examples of what happens in real life. And this bullying, especially to an extent like this, can cause people to come to the conclusion that shooting up the school will fix all their issues. Which it doesn't, but that's what people tend to think. And I'll give props to Ferris for doing a great job at that representation. I wouldn't recommend playing it because it's not very fun, but it does propose a good message about school shootings, albeit not the best, but not the worst. There's definitely worse. Now, I want to discuss the brothers themselves. The Euphoric Brothers are such an anomaly. I mean, how does one just go from making genuinely cool games to this? It's really unfortunate to see. Before Garten of BanBan, the brothers made actual good games with effort, better story, and visuals. Despite some being more controversial than others, they all still had unique qualities that made them at least good. I think they saw the rise of popularity and controversy that was going on in the indie horror genre, and thought they could make a game or two that falls under the category of indie horror, and potentially even make some money off the games. And that's probably why they put the merch store up at the same time they released the game. I do think that Garten of BanBan still could have been a satire take on the problems indie horror was facing, but the execution was shady and made with monetary gain in mind. But I don't think that can take away from the message. The message is still there, assuming there is one, and I like to imagine that the merch store and the fact that Garten of BanBan II cost money could have been a satire on how Poppy Playtime did a similar thing, and a commentary on bigger companies that try to profit off of their game and attract the eyes of younger audiences who will most likely want to buy this shit, and how they tend to ignore drama and controversy or criticism that's being thrown against their game, even though they want to protect their business, even though that doesn't work most of the time. But you can also say that the merchandise was in direct copy to how Poppy Playtime did the same, and they saw that as an opportunity to profit off of their characters. But if we take a moment to look at the description of Introvert, we see a personal about the author from Ferris, which reads, "I am Ferris, one of the Euphoric Brothers, addicted to overthinking, lo-fi, and making video games. I decided to merge all three hobbies into one project, thus Introvert, a teenager simulator was born. I have developed this game completely by myself except for some audio, songs, voice acting, bleh. Oh, and I also am 19 years old and a first-year university student. After releasing a lot of failed commercial games, I realized that I don't care about money and that what I really want is to create my own universe and community. I don't care about money and what I really want to do is create my own universe and community." Now that just doesn't sound like Ferris nor Gebo, the creators of Garten of BanBan, which is apparently an obvious cash grab. As soon as I noticed this note, I was so confused, and it just made the situation even more of a hot mess. You can make the argument that he's lying, but why would he? This was made a few years before they even had the idea of Garten of BanBan, so I doubt that, and I think it's genuine. So what's the right answer? I don't know, it's hard to tell, and I'm confused myself. There's so many questions unanswered about the intent of BanBan moving forward, but until then, I guess we'll have to wait for Garten of BanBan 3. At this point in time, it boils down to what you think, and what you think is honestly just as valid as what I think, especially concerning the confusion surrounding this game's intent in the history of the Euphoric Brothers. So, my final thoughts on this whole situation is that Garten of BanBan is not entirely a satire, but I still think that the actual game and all of its awful aspects were still purposeful. The game was intentionally made to be bad because the brothers probably knew that if they made a game so incredibly awful, it could have the potential to become really big and profitable. And I strongly believe that's why they had planned a merch drop on launch day, along with the sequel. They knew this game was gonna make it big, like they had some way of knowing beforehand, and honestly, I'm convinced these guys are super geniuses. I don't think the brothers are bad people, and they've proven to be good game developers despite some of their more controversial games, but they've taken an unfortunate step in the wrong direction, and ultimately this is going to lead to their reputation being tarnished. I can't stress enough how mind-bogglingly convoluted this weird situation is. I have to ask myself, what's the future gonna look like? Will Garten of BanBan affect the quality of their future games, like Introvert, Consequences, Poo Poo Monster, and Quackity Oliver? Actually, let's talk about this.
So this seems to be something I really overlooked. So we have Introvert, Consequences, Poo Poo Monster, and Quacky Oliver. And then Garten of BanBan 3, of course. Okay, let's look at Introvert. Let's look at Introvert Consequences real quick. 4 high school shooting survivors move to a new city and attend a 5-day group therapy program. Discover the secret situations and people that await you in this surreal universe while trying to deal with the guilt and grief caused by the disturbing, unforgettable past. So I'm assuming this. Yeah, no, this is the sequel. So let's look at the trailer. Okay, lo-fi, of course. That was definitely always something that it's kind of weird, is the lo-fi. This game's supposed to be relatively calm despite the subject matter. So I think that's probably what the lo-fi is. Although it's just so weird hearing like some like distorted voice over like the calmest lo-fi beat ever, and there's like a school shooting scene where the police are showing up. What else is gonna happen? Okay.
We're moving someplace new. Somewhere to start fresh.
So I don't think this game will have anything to do with school shooting, but I guess this would be a nice thing to have. I mean, I don't know how they're gonna present that, just like therapy. Oh no, there's somebody T-posing. Okay, whatever. Yeah, I'm definitely kind of looking forward to that, because I didn't play the whole game because I didn't want to, because I thought it'd be boring, because the game was boring. But I guess maybe this will add more onto that. But it's also nice getting to see more of what happens afterwards. And I think this will better explain the message and put it in a better light with this game. This one seems like it might be presented still like Gen Z, still goofy, still the same themes, whatever. But it might add some closure to the shitposty manner of the first game. So I'm excited for that. I will play this when it comes out, if it comes out. Although, considering it seems like they've been working on Garten of BanBan, the chance of these games coming out, I don't know. Let's look at Poo Poo Monster. Another 3D game. Looks like a big shitpost, I can't lie. This game looks fucking awful, but I'm very sure that is intentional.
Welcome to our humble town.
Okay.
Don't worry, we'll fix your truck as soon as possible and you can be on your way again tomorrow.
Interesting, okay. Another 3D game by the brothers, and I'm assuming this was set to be announced before Puppy Playtime. So once again, I don't know if they're going to finish this game, although it kind of looks like they had the full thing done just in that trailer. Like, I don't know what else you could add. Definitely just looks like a joke game. Just having some fun fucking around. What does it say here? So Quacky Oliver, I thought about this, looks very reminiscent of Garten of BanBan and Egghead Gumpty. So I wonder if they were going to work on this game and then they decided to go over to Garten of BanBan, because it seems like they've been working on games like this for a while now. Like, they've been trying to get into more of the indie mascot horror, because one thing you'll notice is, for example, like Introvert Consequences, like the art here, I gotta say, is freaking cool. I really like it. Poo Poo Monster, relatively simple, but has a silly, dumb logo. And then we have Garten of BanBan 3, which just shows one of the characters and then the name. Same thing with Quacky Oliver. And same thing with Garten of BanBan 1 and 2 and Egghead Gumpty. But like, if you look at all their other games, the art is really well done, especially on Life on Pizza and Human Apocalypse and How We Got Here. Actually, no, just all of these look really good. Except that one, I don't know what's going on there. But, like, okay, what I think is that the Euphoric Brothers have been trying to do this for a while. They've been trying to make something potentially so absurd that it gets really popular and then they can market off of it. They tried it with Egghead Gumpty, failed, and then I speculate that they attempted something with Quacky Oliver, although Quacky Oliver does look a lot better than both of these games, because it follows their usual style. But like, you know, Sunny Daycare, like, that's very reminiscent of BanBan's Playground or whatever. I don't fucking know. But maybe they've been trying to do this for a while, and it's been trial and error for them. So that's kind of what I think about. That. I just thought that was kind of interesting, and I think this might back up my claim that the game might have been satire, because it seems like they've been trying to do that. Little to no success, or at least not satire, more so been trying to make a popular indie horror game for a while to potentially make money. I don't know. It's really, really confusing, but
Brothers, if you're watching this, I highly advise you not to continue Garten of BanBan or even Egghead Gumpty, and go back to your original game format. More BanBans is only going to lead to your reputation being awful, and you're probably already going to only be remembered for making that one really bad video game. So trust me, nobody wants to be controversial on the internet, and it isn't good for anybody. Trust me, I would know. I made the statement that your game was satire, and look where that got me. Well, presentation is done, everybody. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the future. Everybody is gone. Right. Oh, yeah, the sound. My bad.